Hello there, dear friends. Kalidas here to offer some astrological thoughts for the day. Today we're going to be talking about the fabulous process of Sade Sati. Sade Sati has to do with the planet of Saturn, the planet Saturn moving through the zodiac, and it's going to go over the place where your moon was when you were born. And it includes the sign before, the sign during, and the sign after the natal moon of the individual. And that also includes the chart for organizations and such. And it just so happens that the United States of America, being born in 1776 on July 4th, was born with an Aquarius Moon, which means that Saturn is on the way to the United States Moon. Right now, Saturn is in Capricorn, the sign before Aquarian Moon of the United States. In 2023, it will level out and move over the moon directly, which is arguably the most intensely transitional time. And then it will begin to enter into Pisces, which will be the sign after the United States moon. So that is the Sade Sati process, and it usually lasts about 7.5 to 8 years. And we've just entered into it in the United States here in January, starting January 14th. And look, already there's so much change. The United States is meant to go through a big transformation at this time. It's very hot today, and I was working in my garden just before this, and I kind of lost track of time, so I'm still sweating. But the United States is about to go through a big transition, and that transition will look like a trapezoid in that we go up, and it's kind of new, like what's happening? We're accelerating, things are changing, what's this about? And then when the Saturn planet gets on top of the United States moon, meaning when Saturn goes into Aquarius in January of 2023, it will stop going up and it will level out, and this will be the highest point. And it will reveal a lot during that time to the individual who's going through Sade Sati. When Saturn is on the moon, his job is to point out the shadows. His job is to point out what has not yet been learned. And this is why in general people do not like Sade Sati, because we like to have ease and pleasure. And Sade Sati enforces lessons and growth. For a yogi, that's a very good thing. That's what we want. But the United States is not yet a completely yogic country, is it? So, and it has Mercury with Rahu in the 8th house, in Cancer, which represents extremely emotionally afflicted form of communication. And when the communication is afflicted by emotion, it's not clear. And so look at how confused the culture is, how many different viewpoints, how much arguing and fighting and lack of clarity there is. This is a retrograde Mercury conjunct Rahu in Cancer in the 8th house. Extremely poor placement. And that's what it represents growth, though. It's not that it's just a bad thing, it's that it represents a lot of growth for the United States and learning how to communicate. But first, we have to learn about calming the emotions. And that's what Sade Sati will teach us. And it's interesting that the moon is in Aquarius in the United States chart. Aquarius is a fixed air sign. What does that mean? Air sign is a sign of consciousness or of ideas. The air signs are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. And Aquarius happens to be the fixed air sign, meaning it's pretty strong in what it thinks it knows. And the moon in the United States chart is in the 3rd house of free will, of freedom. And we sure do like to affirm our freedom, don't we? But the interesting thing about having a 3rd house moon is that will be opposite the 9th house. And the 9th house is, if the 3rd house is your will and your free choice, the 9th house is God's will and spiritual attunement and direction. And that's what the United States will learn, I believe, during this Sade Sati, is that we can't remain fixed on our idea of freedom unless we have guidance and understand what freedom really is. And there's a lot of fixed ideas about what freedom represents to at least America, the country that I live in. But what is free will? Sade Sati is meant to free our will, meaning it's meant to point out our shadows. Where is our will not serving us? Where are we making choices that are no longer helpful for us? In fact, they bring a lot of pain. A Sade Sati process will enforce that pain and make the subject very aware of that pain so that they can grow beyond it. And hopefully that will happen. But a sign of fixed ideas like Aquarius in the third house is kind of arrogant. It's going to get hit hard by a kind of a tidal wave of heavy energy, of difficult tests, let's call it. And when that moon has Saturn go over it, what it will do is clean the moon. Now, Sade Sati can be a terrible time. It can destroy someone if they resist, if they don't understand that there's growth, inner personal growth being asked of them. So if a person going through it decides to blame everyone external to themselves for their issues, that will make life very hard, because it's not going to make the issues go away. It's going to compound them, and it's going to blind the subject of what they can do about the problems. We can't control the external world. We can only control our inner reactive process, and that's how we transcend our karma, is by changing our reactive process. And that's exactly what Sade Sati is so good at doing for us, helping us change our responses to life. And thus, it fundamentally, gradually, changes our magnetism so that what we attract can be hopefully better. So it looks like a trapezoid. Right now we're going up. We'll flatten out in 2023 at a very high, let's say, expectation from the universe. It's saying grow, and you're going to be put under pressure, which would be like higher up. Like you're going to be given awareness of the issues, and you're not going to be able to hide from them. Basically, it's like the planet Saturn was born to point out what is unclean about our moon, our ego, or our personality. So if you're in America, you were born during a very interesting time, and surely the country will go through a huge transformation. But Sade Sati ultimately promises good things if we're doing what we need to do, which is helping other people, helping to support those who are in need at this time. If you are in this culture, everyone's going to feel that American moon suffering, and we're going to be embarrassed about what we discover about our society. And it will reveal shadows on the moon, meaning, how is the United States reflecting divinity at this time? Is it a perfect full moon, or does it have a lot of shadows on it? Is it waxing, meaning is it growing in light, or is it waning? Is it growing in its shadows? Well, it's very common at the beginning of Sade Sati for the shadows to grow, and that's because we need to become aware of them. If they don't grow and begin to dominate and create pain, then we won't do anything about them. And that's why the Sade Sati is so valuable, because it will show us the problems. But being a country with a third house moon, pretty attached to our freedom, the way that we see it, we'll have to realize that we need God's guidance if we want real freedom. If we want the United States to be a free country, as we like to affirm it is, then we're going to need to become more spiritualized, because our culture's lost and very unfree, very bound. Our culture is bound by the senses, bound by materialism, bound by many things. Let's not get too judgmental. I'm part of it, so I blame myself too. And what can we do? We can work on ourselves. That's what it comes down to. If you don't like the world you're in, well, you attracted it and your magnetism drew it to you. So it's time to change your magnetism if you'd like a different situation. And that's kind of how the school of life works. Remember though, if we blame external things, especially political leaders who we have no influence over and our negative energy does nothing for, if we think that the problem is political, that's just another form of us hiding from our own work that's being revealed through the difficult situation. And I apologize if that's somewhat offensive, but I include again myself in that. The political situation irritates me. I think there's a lot that needs to be discovered that's still not out of the darkness, out of the basement. And it irritates me when I see lack of dharma. But what can I do about it? I can use the situation that God's given me to change myself and my reactive process. That's the airplane route to God. That combined with devotional prayer and asking for guidance from the divine, plus the technique of Kriya Yoga, which addresses very scientifically the way the human being was made. From the base of the spine to the spiritual eye is our karmic energy. And Kriya Yoga teaches us how to basically, it can be very related to Sade Sati. It teaches us how to offer our shadows here into the sunlight with surrender and wish to change, and prayer for guidance and how we can change to improve our life. Because we don't always know, right? We can't always say exactly what's needed. Maybe it's that one of the problems in our country is that people think they do know what's needed, and yet there's a bunch of different opinions on what's needed, so who's right? It's when we take this situation in the world and we transform ourselves by what it reveals in us that we grow the most and become happier and freer. So what is the Sade Sati for you personally? Well, it depends on what house the moon rules in your chart. And for the United States of America, for Sagittarius ascendant, which is the United States of America, that is the 8th house. The moon rules the 8th house, which is the house of death, rebirth, and transformation. So Sagittarius ascendants especially have pretty intense Sade Satis because we experience death, rebirth, and transformation in kind of an enforced way. But if you're a yogi and you know how to do these processes of lifting your shadows and letting go of your resistance, embracing what is, and growing through it, that will be a great service to you. And the 9th house comes after the 8th house, and the good news is that the 9th house is the house of grace and good fortune. How do we get grace and good fortune? Well, we need to go through this process of death, rebirth, and transformation first. And what does it mean? It just means that you ultimately arrive at the place where you realize you're a child and you need God's help if you want to be happy. And that's a very basic and simple statement we could make about Sade Sati, or the 8th house, which is what the moon represents, the kind of energy it represents in the United States chart, is a very intense transformative energy. But ultimately, it will create a rebirth for our country. Aren't you looking forward to it? We should all be praying for the planet at this time and filling all our world leaders who do have the dharma and the karma to have to deal with this situation on the front lines. We should be praying for them and praying that God influenced them. There were some really bad decisions that some evil world leaders were going to make many years ago, and the yogis of India were able to deflect those bad decisions by filling the minds of those people who were misdirected with different thoughts, meaning that the yogis have way more power than our political leaders, and they will not let things go too far in a specific direction that's not God's will. So trust the saints, trust Babaji, and trust your guru. If you don't have a guru, find a guru. You need one at this time. You need wisdom in your life to be able to be in this country that's going to go through such, I would say, trauma. There's a great possibility of cataclysmic trauma. And I say that not just because of the astrology, but because my own guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, predicted that there would be a world-changing cataclysm. He said he came to teach us, his disciples, how to stand unshaken amidst the crash of breaking worlds. And we have not yet seen this, but it's very close. And I think we all feel that. I think that some of us feel that this may be what we're seeing, the actual cataclysm, but There will probably be more steps when the Sade Sati gets more established, meaning when Saturn moves into Aquarius and is right on top of the United States moon. Then we will get to see what this transformation might entail. We might get more information. There might be events that are unforeseen at this time that really change the world in some profound way. Perhaps at first it will seem devastating, but ultimately it could produce spiritual healing for humanity. And Paramhansa Yogananda added to his prediction that after a great war that would happen, there would be 300 years of peace on earth. That's pretty good news. So let's hang in there together and keep our security in the masters and in God rather than in the decisions we see our political leaders making, because there's reason to find goodness and badness in all of creation. It depends on what you focus on. Master Yogananda said, why look at the drains, when the gutters, when there's beauty all around you? The yogis learn to be happy now and focus on what's good and be grateful for their friendships and their gardens and their communities and their spiritual path and their relationship with God. These are things that can uplift us rather than what the media keeps pushing in our faces is the negativity and the get angry, go out there and cause a ruckus. It's a really terrible service that they're doing to the American public at this time. So I wanted to share something from one of my first spiritual books that I read, and I think it very much applies to the service that Saturn does for us when he traverses the zodiac over our own natal moon. And just so you know, something personal I'll share is that I too have an Aquarius moon, so I am also in the beginning of Sade Sati cycle, and so is my wife Melody. We were both born with Aquarian moon. And we'll see how it's very related to this situation that the world is in. If you have Aquarius moon, you're in it too. If you have Capricorn moon, then you're in the middle of it, which means that right now you're in a pretty intense time of life in which there's a great opportunity to offer shadows that are being exposed into the light. And that will be done inside. It can't be done external. God doesn't allow us to control this external world. Have you noticed? He also doesn't allow us to see the future. And it's amazing how he makes the future imperceptible. Why does he do that? Because if we think we know the future and base our security on that it's all going to just go well, then we won't try to get in contact with the true light in ourselves, the true security. If everything was just guaranteed to be safe and sound and going to be harmonious and easy, we would make barely any effort to contact Spirit. God has to create problems for us in order that we seek Him. And in the end, the problem's temporary and that attunement is eternal. That closeness we've grown to God, we've grown closer to God and we get to keep that progress. But the trial is temporary. So remember that when you're in it, because satanic force will cause you to feel that trial will keep lasting forever. Just as the presence of hell, the eternal hell, the idea of it being eternal is simply based on humankind's tendency to think when things are terrible, they're just going to remain so because there's no solution in sight. But keep in mind that this world goes up and down no matter what we do. And if we learn how to master our reactive process, when it goes up and down, it won't fool us as much. We won't get tricked into thinking that everything's going to be just easy from now on and then be really upset the next day when things go wrong. So try to develop realistic expectations of life in that it's obligatory to experience duality here. But if we work on our reactive process, meaning if today has troublesome external situations, or if today has victorious ones, we remain neutral, anchored in our true security and eternal Divine Mother's presence. She will not go away, but this world will. So if you're upset that you have to wear a mask, or if you're upset about how the heat feels on that mask, or about how the carbon dioxide makes your brain feel when you inhale it back in, well, that's all very temporary. Play the game, Try not to upset anyone. We're here for harmony and love and friendship. And if somebody takes offense, go ahead and play the game and put it on. And if you believe that it's saving people's lives, more power to you. That's great. But the resistance is what creates the issue. Whatever we're being asked to do by the universe, if we resist it, that will create a shadow in ourselves. We'll find in ourselves a shadow. So what else could we call it? I keep calling it a shadow on the moon, but we could also call it a boundary in our consciousness. And the goal of life is to attain samadhi, boundless bliss. And that means that we need to be okay with everything, with being in everything. If there's anything we resist, we won't be able to go into samadhi, because we'll resist that part of creation and our consciousness won't be able to expand there. So listen to Rabindranath Tagore, this great Indian poet who spent time with Master during his life. He has an excellent quote about, like I said, what Sade Sati is meant to do for us. He explains, we cannot absolutely possess the infinite being. It has to be experienced, and this experience is bliss. The bird, while taking its flight in the sky, experiences at every beat of its wings that the sky is boundless, that its wings can never carry it beyond. Therein lies its joy. In the cage, the sky is limited. It may be quite enough for all the purposes for the bird's life, only it is not more than is necessary. The bird cannot rejoice within the limits of the necessary. It must feel that what it has is immeasurably more than it could ever want or comprehend. And then only can it be glad. Thus, our soul must soar in the infinite, and she must feel every moment that in the sense of not being able to come to the end of her attainment is her supreme joy, her final freedom. So he's speaking about the state of boundless consciousness, no resistance, no boundaries. And the reason we come into this world is to dissolve those boundaries. Paramhansa Yogananda said that there are souls lining up to get into this world, eager to take part in life. And yet they're in the higher astral realm where there's way less problems. Why would they be lining up to get in here? Because this world is perfectly designed to dissolve our boundaries and free us spiritually. And it's not as easy to get free in the astral world, apparently, because it's much easier and much more harmonious and filled with the kind of things that help us to rest, relax, rejuvenate, and anchor ourselves in present moment blissful consciousness. So in this world, all of that gets taken away. It's terrible, isn't it? I hate it. But here we are, and it's temporary, and we got to rise above that negative emotion, that negative response. And how do we do that? We're not supposed to know. We're supposed to pray. We're supposed to ask our guru, say, help me to rise out of this, because I don't know how, but I know that you know how. And the part of it is stilling the mind. How do we still the mind? By letting go of attachment. Think of it like this. Next time you meditate, there are going to be thoughts of past and future that come into your mind to distract you. But if we face each thing that enters as not our own, but instead an opportunity to give back to God that which is really His, then that could be a nice way to transcend the attachments that come in and distract us in meditation. When one comes, we say, oh, something's coming, and that's part of my life, I'm interested in it. Should I follow it all around in circles for an hour? Or should I recognize whose it really is? That's not mine. Yes, that too is God's. No matter what it is, no matter what comes into our mind, it's God's creation. And one of the ways to transcend restless thinking is to practice this self-offering technique of Every restless thought that comes, I'm not going to be enticed to follow it. Instead, I'm going to give it back to its maker. God is the one who created our bodies and our world and our children and our husbands and wives and our friendships. And all of it will resume its true identity when life is over, back in the higher astral heavens. But here in this world, we get to have problems, and we get our divinity veiled, and that's painful. And it educates us about where our security lies, doesn't it? It's not so easy here. We don't have ease and pleasure 100% of the time, no matter who we are, no matter how successful we are in the eyes of man or the world, no matter how much money we make. We cannot live in ease and pleasure all the time. Obligatory duality here in this creation. And yet Yogananda says there are souls lining up to get in here. They're saying, give me that Sade Sati. I want to come into creation and I want to face my shadows because I want to transcend them so I can feel closer to my true source. So the United States chart is just one that's really popping off right now with some transformation, and here we are if you're in this country. But the world at large, of course, is in a rising yuga, and we've come out of Kali Yuga, and there's still a lot of leftover lack of completely dharmic there's still a lot of darkness afflicting this rising age that's left over from Kali Yuga. And if you're alive and you're enthusiastic about truth, it's very likely it's your dharma to help Dwapara Yuga to be free from the shadows of Kali Yuga. And pretty much everything's been infected with it. Even the path of yoga became a very world-rejecting and sadhus only, and you must live in a cell wall cave to be able to find God. That's a Kali Yuga perspective. We can find God while raising families and going to work if our consciousness is aware of the divine presence and performs our actions in a self-offering, non-attached way. Babaji said in the autobiography of a yogi that the person who discharges their earthly responsibilities dutifully, responsibly, with an attitude of non-attachment surely treads the highest path to enlightenment. That was paraphrased, of course, but I'm not a memory bank here. Now, there's something else that I'd like to offer, and I'll keep offering this as the days go forward, but I do an astrology practice and I read people's charts to them and I help them to understand their life karma. It's a very rewarding service, but a lot of the time we talk about the spiritual techniques, and I found that through the schooling here at Ananda, I've learned to be a meditation teacher, and I have credentials around that, learning to teach meditation, and I'd also like to offer, as part of my astrology practice, meditation counseling. And it would be probably a very cheap price, but it's just an idea that came to me recently, and I think that it would be a fun way to serve, is to come together with someone and to work on our meditations. What can we do to deepen them? Is it devotion that we need to grow in? Then let's get together and learn some chants. If it's focus, then let's think of some techniques that we can do to calm the mind. But there's so many techniques that Yogananda gave, and I would be happy and willing to serve in that way. So I think, as well as my astrology practice that I offer readings, I'll also begin offering meditation counseling, and hopefully that becomes a valuable way to serve. So anyway, thank you for joining me today, and I appreciate your attention and your kindness and friendship, and it's my joy to serve and share. God bless you.